Welcome back to Philly.net. Tonight we are doing a lab on UI frameworks and JavaScript based, and we're going to take a look at React, Angular, and Vue, not necessarily in that order. But before we get started, everybody paying attention. E A L E S. Yay! All right. I think we have one Eagles jacket here, and that's excellent. So we are so happy. I could not. So, all right. So I'll do a couple announcements before we get started with the stuff for tonight. But let's go look at our meetup site. So this is the meeting we are at. And tonight, React, Angular, and Vue. And this is our last lab before our code camp, which is in March. And we do have a meeting lined up for February 21st. We did not post the speakers yet. We'll have that by the weekend for you. So if you want to know, using the meetup interface, how to see what's happening in the future, the easiest thing to do there is to go to the second tab, which is Meetups, and it'll show what's coming up next. And then, if you click on Calendar on the right-hand side, it shows you the old traditional calendar, and you'll see that there is indeed a monthly meeting reserved for the 21st. And we will replace that with the proper one. Tony Vergoldi just lined up the speakers just this week, so we'll be able to post that for you by the end of the week. Just a reminder, March we are not going to have a lab or a monthly meeting because we're all busy filling coolers and buying food for Code Camp. And Code Camp is going to take place March 23rd and 24th. Most important dates for you are next Tuesday, the 13th, I think. Okay, Tuesday the 13th is when we are going to turn on sales for full day training. If any of you are in a larger company and want to get a group purchase, which implies discounting, send me an email tomorrow or Friday. The way we're going to do that this time is we're going to have those people even sign up ahead of time, and we're going to send you a spreadsheet you fill out, and that way you can, like, some companies do 20 people at a time. So, anyways. Other things happening, if we were to go in the future a little bit, we do have placeholders in April, and we do not have a speaker lined up for the April meeting, but we are going to resume the hands-on labs a week and a half after Code Camp, and we've decided for probably a period of 5 or 6 months, we're going to go back to our roots and do ASP.NET Core, Razor, Signal R, Entity Framework. Aha, I remember that one. Yes. So Rob Kaiser's putting together a curriculum for that. So we'll go through that. And of course, we did that about probably a year and a half ago. We went through a series of labs on that. But a lot has changed since then. So especially in the field, Razor has changed significantly, and they just introduced the Signal R update. So hopefully you get some value out of that. We have our WordPress site up and running. That's the one that is in our original address, and that's been up and running since 2002. But philly.net.org, if you go to the home page there, you will see the backside of me and Rob. And then down here you can see And it's sort of a funky theme we have from WordPress, but for now it works. But the one on the left is the upcoming meeting, which will be swapped out this weekend. This one is the upcoming lab, and this one's the upcoming camp. If you choose the camp, you can see that we are starting to fill out the roster of sponsors. We still need a couple more. I think we're up to like 8 or 9 sponsors, but we need, I'd like to see maybe another 5 more to really fill out. And again, so everyone understands, the Code Camp Friday, there are no sponsors. That's why we charge for that day. That pays for the refreshments of the party. Code Camp Saturday, we have lots of sponsors. They actually provide more money than we need, and the rest of the money goes to run these meetings for the rest of the year. That's our strategy. We do have actually a financial budget, unlike the federal government. So you'll see also we have shiny new pictures of speakers. And yes, Mike Molesky, I believe, is bringing his dog for his talk. But you can see who some of the speakers are. So far, we have only posted the Friday full-day sessions, so you can read through those, see which one you're interested in. Next Tuesday, when you come to this page, there'll be little buttons to the next to each of these saying sign up or register, whatever clever word I come up with. So that's how that works. All right. Couple other things that we're just working on if you want to become a speaker. This call for speakers closes this weekend, but we're actually using a new service here called Sessionize. And this is a cloud-based service. And it's actually worked out very well. But prospective speakers go up here and they log in using either their Gmail, Facebook, one of those accounts. And then they can enter their bio, their picture, and all their sessions. And it makes it real easy for me to put the schedule together. So since I'm here at Sessionize, I might as well show you. Okay. I think I use Google for this. There you go. So you'll see that we have 38 unique speakers and 71 sessions. If I click on sessions, you can see all the sessions that people have submitted. Mr. Ross, look at the top one. Good timing, huh? So what I do is I accept that. See, this is real time. And then this is my favorite part of this. I like this interface. So then I go to the schedule. And this is a cute thing here. We're going to go to the schedule builder. And this is what Friday looks like, and Saturday. There you go. And somewhere we should put Michaelian. What do you think? I don't know what section he's going to end up in. Well, he's probably doing something that's SharePoint related. So what we'll do is we'll put this guy over here. And then we'll just drag him. Okay? And that's how easy it is to make a code camp. And what's cool about this is I really like this because all of the sessions, the speakers have already submitted their pictures, their bio, and stuff like that. And this has a elaborate workflow system to send notifications. So once I lock this schedule in this weekend, then I'll press a button and then all 40 or 50 speakers get emails. And then Stashu, they have to respond to those emails, confirming that they have a
it's funny, I checked it with my spam folder.
Oh, well, I can't fix that for you. But yes, so let the world know, make sure that address is not blocked. Okay, so that's something new we've been doing. And I'm going all the way back here to the good old Philly.net site. So once all those sessions are done, then they will get put into this interface and we'll be pretty well good to go. So any questions on upcoming club business? Okay. It is somewhat sad to report that tonight we were supposed to have, as of like 2 days ago, we had 190 people signed up. And you'll see that if you go into this session, as of right now, there's still 139 signed up, and we probably have 40 people here. So, but, you know, it's only money, it's only catering. We'll have a good time anyways. So, could everyone... Excellent. We love all 13 of them. Yes?
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Thank you. So I guess.
Who are you, sir?
Thank you for the introduction. Rich Ross. I am Microsoft's employee here, working on the working for the MTC on Azure and application development. But what they're talking about now is our YouTube channel, which we hit a couple weeks ago. We actually hit hundreds of subscribers. So thank you all for that. That got us to the point of doing a vanity URL up there, and that's in place. The one thing we didn't announce last time is that we wanted to basically give away a subscription or a pass for the Friday session for CodeCamp, a free pass. What we need to do for that is, if you want to participate and you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you have to make your profile public. Otherwise, I don't know who's subscribed, and I can't put your name in the hat then for that. So if you want to participate in that, just make sure you put your profile as public. I will draw them at 7:30. I'll take a download of that and do a spreadsheet, and then we'll do a random number generator, and the lucky winner will be announced before we end up.
And they get a Friday full-day ticket.
They get a Friday full-day ticket, which gets them Saturday too.
Absolutely.
So there
Lots
you go.
of good free food and free learning. You'll notice, and we're very appreciative of what Rich and Chris Gomez have been doing. They're really spearheading this idea of streaming user groups live. And at CodeCamp, if you are interested, Chris is going to give a talk and explain all the technology that goes on behind the scenes and show you how all of this works. We are proud to show you that there are 142 subscribers now.
Yep.
And Tony, how many online right now?
16 now.
We're up to 16. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And we are, speaking of CodeCamp, we are planning to, at least for the sessions in one of these rooms, since they'll be probably the larger, more popular sessions, we're going to do a live stream of those on the Saturday only. We're not going to stream the Fridays. But so you'll have a chance to, even if you couldn't get tickets, you'll at least be able to see what should be the big sessions.
excellent. All right. Thanks a lot, Rich. Thanks. Okay. So if you just go to youtube.com/philly.net, you spell that one out. Then you can see the library of things that we've already done. All right, so everyone that's going to be trying to do hands-on today, here is your assignment. You go to the meetup for tonight. And we learned something very interesting over the last 2 months. Did you know that once a meeting starts, the organizers can't go in and edit this meeting description in any way, shape, or form? I agree. So if you scroll down, you will see my ugly mug and a bunch of links. This is what we're going to use to do our work today. So I sent out an email this morning, hopefully you got that, to all the attendees explaining that tonight everything is going to be done browser-based. We don't need to do Visual Studio Code. So hopefully you'll get some value out of this. Shameless plug, if you're interested in this topic, for the Friday full-day sessions at CodeCamp, I'm going to redo this, but it's going to be 7.5 hours instead of less than 2 hours. And that one is actually going to go in much more detail and actually use Visual Studio Code and get much more detailed with handling data, doing coding tricks. So I thought we would go in the following order. We're going to start with some projects that I already built for you, because you don't, in a period of 30, 40 minutes, you don't have time to build 3 projects, one in React, one in Vue, one in Angular. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the first one, walk around, I'll explain it to you, and you're going to make a modest change. Okay? Then the second half of the evening, we're going to do the second link for each of these. I'm hoping that all of this works the way I had planned. So what I'd like you to do is start with the first link here, React with routing. And I'm just going to open that in a new tab. And you should get something that crashes. Excellent. It's gonna be an interesting day here. What the hell is what is g.testrunner? What did I do? Well, hang in there. And yes, as you said, it works in yours. So the other way I get to them, oh, I know what it probably is. For me, it probably wants me to sign in. I bet, what's that? Okay, so mine I had to sign in. I don't know enough about these tools to tell you whether that's required. Chris, you said no? Okay.
Yeah, we're still learning about these. Are fairly new.
Yes.
They're awesome in-box tools. In fact, I just used them last weekend at a high school hackathon to just teach kids back very quickly. But they're new.
So tonight we're going to use 2 different tools. The one that I've been using for the last couple months is called Code Sandbox. That's the one that allows you to do both React and Vue projects online. It saves all your code. It makes it at a URL so you can share it. The big advantage of this is that all of you are going to get your own URL that you can sort of take home with you and play with later. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to come up. Now, technically, you could just save this under your own name, or you could click fork. And when you fork, basically, it makes a new URL that is going to be specific to you. And you don't have to necessarily write that down, because what happens if you log in, which I do with my GitHub account, and you go to your profile, what you'll see is that all of your sandboxes are saved with descriptive names. And they even show like little statistics about how many people have used them and stuff like that. So that's what I would like you to concentrate on tonight. Whoops. That's not the one I'm supposed to work on. There we go. Okay. So, how many people have this, at least this screen up and sort of running? And there's 1 or 2 that are stymied. I can't necessarily fix it. Those of you that don't have a computer, pay attention to the screen. Okay, we're going to do a walkthrough. Now, when you use these tools, it hides some of the bootstrapping. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't show you how it actually loads React.js or React.dom.js. It happens in the background. It doesn't necessarily show you how it does what's called bootstrapping, which is actually taking the code on your page and wrapping it and making it, assigning it to a specific div on the page. Let's not worry about that tonight. We're going to learn about the actual syntax. So there is a lot of stuff to see tonight. So what I would start with doing, and I'm trying to figure out Usually at the top it has little things that tell me oh, come on. So usually it lets me switch between, forget it. All right, so I'm going to use this button over here. And the button allows me to hide the code or the project files or not. And let's take a look at what we have. So typically what we're going to do is we're going to start with index.html. And this is React. And by convention, what you're going to do is you're just going to have a single div. And the div is going to be assigned some ID. It does not have to be called root. That's just what most people do. And then index.js is the thing that sort of wires this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the file listing so you can see the code a little bit better. So the first thing it does is it imports React, and then it imports something called render from react.dom. So those are the two dependencies that you need to get React to work. It does this thing called the browser router, which we'll talk about routing in a few minutes. And then it imports something called app. App is a component that you've created. And in here, this is the magic. It says get element by ID root. So that's where I showed you div ID equals root. It takes that and it replaces that div with this. And this looks like standard markup. Does anyone remember the fancy name for this in React? JSX. Okay, so JSX, so app is going to point to the app component. So if I go back here and look at the components folder, I want to go to app.js. And what you'll see is app.js is going to, again, import React. All components have to do that. It's going to create a page layout. And it's going to do it by calling other components that I created. So I created a component called header. As you could imagine, that's the top gray or white area here with the buttons on it. Secondly, I made a component called main. Main is where the middle section is. That's where we're going to display our content. And then I created a component called footer. Now, to show you different techniques, I'm going to pass a phrase from this component to the footer component and ask the footer component to display it. And that is done in React with something called a prop. So as you can imagine, if I go test the interface over here, it doesn't do very interesting stuff. It just goes division, conference, NFL, and if you were to change the size of this, which isn't easy to do with this mouse, if you were to change the size of this, you would see that this is a routed application. See, conference, division. So, questions. How do we set up the routing? Where do we put the other components? Can the other components have their own source code, their own HTML, their own CSS? Okay, they better. And you're going to learn today in all three frameworks how that's done, and you're going to find that they all do the same stuff with very different syntax. That's the whole point of my talk. Okay, so the applications are going to look almost identical in all three of the frameworks. All right, so you sort of understand the layout here. What's the next thing we have to do? Come on, I need somebody to actually be a cheerleader here. Okay, it looks like we could look at main, and that's a good guess. If I look at main, aha! In React, main is where they actually set up the routing. And what they do is they import a statement called switch. And notice a lot of the custom directives in React are uppercase, or not uppercase, proper case. So we're going to import switch and route from React Router DOM. Now to really make this work, and what I often do is I like to separate my the stuff that I wrote from the stuff that comes from Facebook. So I made a component called NFL. I made one called Conference, one Division. Each of those is going to fill the middle panel. How do I know to do that? Well, the routing in React is done with something called a switch. So we're going to switch, and for each of these routes, we're going to change the component inside main based on what the URL is. So if I come over here and I click on conference, it actually displays the conference component, and the same thing for division. It's that simple, okay? So let's take a look at the definition of these three, and you're going to find that they're really simple. If I go over to NFL, well, I'm going to save this. And by the way, Control S in this code Sandbox will save any changes that you happen to make. Oh, come on. Okay, so NFL.js. Let's take a look at that one. Okay, now this is going to teach you an interesting technique in React. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a section. Section is an HTML5 element. Inside there, I'm going to have an H1. And the H1 is going to return the slogan. Well, what's the slogan? The slogan is, are you ready for some football? How do I get that slogan there? Well, in this case, I am using an explicit class creation where I'm extending React.component. And when I do that, that gives me the ability to have a constructor. In the constructor, I can create something called state, which is essentially the data context for the component. And all I'm doing in state is I'm making a JavaScript object called state. And in that object, I'm going to have one field called slogan, and it's assigned to a static string. So this is an example of how you would have some data from your JavaScript code appear in the front end. Okay? Now let's contrast that to the footer. And in the footer, what I did, whoops. In footer, what I did is I didn't do a fancy extends here. I'm doing a short form notation, which React programmers are famous for, like trying to condense stuff so that it's almost unreadable. And what they do is they say, I'm passing in a thing called name. Deal with it. So the name becomes what's called a prop. The prop can then be used inside your JSX. And the rules of JSX, you must have one wrapping element, one and only one. And since all I have here is a footer, it works very simply. I'll just take the name and place it in the footer. And if you look on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, it takes Philly.NET Labs and puts it right down there. Where did that get defined? Just to remember what I showed you earlier, if I go to app.js, what you'll see here in app.js is it says Philly.NET Labs. And if I change this to hands-on labs, you'll see in real time the footer changes. Okay, so does everybody understand how you pass data to a component? Okay, the only other thing you need to learn in React is it's annoying working with CSS. And this is why. There are different ways to do CSS, but everything in React is sort of programmatic. What that means is you have to create an object called styles and assign the styles to the class name and stuff like that. Or you can sort of do it the ES6 way, and you just import the CSS file. And if I import the CSS file, it's going to take effect. And unfortunately, it takes effect to all of the components There are ways to scope your CSS down to a single component, but I want you to pay close attention when we go into Vue and Angular. The handling of CSS is much, much slicker there. Okay? So, anyways, watch what happens when I switch. They all have the same background color. And if you were to carefully look, you'll see that, where is it here? If you go to division.css, it's supposed to be light goldenrod yellow. And if you go to conference CSS, it's supposed to be light blue. Well, apparently that doesn't work. Okay, but the rest of it does. All right, now, ready for homework? You are to add a fourth tab called Super Bowl. Ready? Okay. What do you think I should make first? Exactly. We need a new component. So you go up to the component folder and you click on New File, which is the second button. I really did mean to click on it. There it is. So that's going to be called Super Bowl. And I am pretty specific about my casing. I'm going to make S and B uppercase. Since I make a Super Bowl JS, it thinks it's just a JavaScript file. Okay? Now, since I don't like to be real clever, I'm going to go to conference.js. I'm going to copy everything there and paste it in the Super Bowl JS. And if I do that, you will see right away that Super Bowl JS now has a logo of a React component because it looks at the text and says, oh, you're importing React and you're creating something called conference. What do we do at conference? I can do this. I can be a programmer. Now watch what happens when I change conference CS. Oops. Come on, mouse. Jeez. Okay. Now, nothing happened on the right-hand side, right? Should something happen? And not, you should say absolutely. Why? Because superbowl.cs does not exist. If it does not exist, I bet this component crashes. Interesting. Well, the reason it doesn't crash is because we're not using it anywhere. What's the next step? Where did we define the components and make them available for the menu? Okay, next step is correct. You go to main.js. And what I want you to do in main.js is copy the bottom route, but don't do that until you copy the import. Because what you have to do is you have to import the Super Bowl from the Super Bowl file. And now it's going to crash because as soon as you try and import that, it's going to look and say, there's a component that has an illegal CSS file. We'll fix it in a minute. Go down here, and in the bottom, in the switch statement, copy the bottom line and change that to Super Bowl. Oops. And also make the path Super Bowl. I'm a little crazy about this. I make all my paths lowercase. If you do what you want. Okay, now, interesting. So apparently it's working again, but I don't see Super Bowl standing up on the menu. Why?
Not matter.
Exactly. So the last thing you want to do is go into header. And header.js has 3 LIs. We have to tell it to specifically add an LI that is going to route us to the Super Bowl by using a link statement. And once I do that, you'll see that I now have a 4th button in my routing. Okay, so basically 3 steps. You make the component, you put it in main, so it fits in the switch statement, and finally you add it to the header with a link. Okay? Now, can I actually go to the Super Bowl? Yes, I can, but it's not showing me anything useful. Aha. And the reason is because that CSS file doesn't exist. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to go in here and make a new file called, come on, yeah, geez. I do apologize, my mouse handling here is terrible, but it's superbowl.css. Now, you have to understand that some people really like keeping their CSS in separate files for separation of concerns purposes. You know, and you're going to see when we get to Vue and Angular, it's common to not do that. So what's the easiest way to put the CSS in there? Go to conference, copy, and then go back to Super Bowl and paste. Okay, and then what I'm going to do here is I think I made that blue. I forget what I made it. Oh, that's way too old. No, maroon. Yeah, was it Ultra that I was using? You'll see it when we get to the other ones. Oh, for Christ's sakes. But just pick a color. Light pink, that's perfect. Okay. So, anyways. So now that we have a valid Super Bowl CSS file, it takes effect immediately in the UI, and as I switch between these, what happens? That's very disappointing. I know that Pink got to sing the national anthem, but she should not be making us watch her color all the time. All right, so any questions on React?
The file where you had a component or an extended base class,
Yes?
does the name state have any significance in there? Have to take that, or is it?
It is sort of a built-in thingy.
Okay, so it's not just convention. There's other stuff.
There's a lot of stuff that, one of the biggest things to learn with these frameworks is how to manage the data flow between the components. And what you're going to see today is very rudimentary. For most of the work that I would do, I would use something like a Flux architecture. So I would either use Redux with React, Vuex with Vue, and I will show you at the end of tonight, the last thing we're going to look at is I'll show you how to make a data provider in Angular, which is similar to using Redux. And it's sort of a central place to store all your data for all your components. So, but yes, it has to be called state. So, all right. So, was that the most fun you've ever had with React? Okay. So, next step. If you want to save this, well, your URL should now be different than mine. Can you confirm? I'm sure yours is better. Mine's older. Yes, correct. So as Chris pointed out, forking is your friend. So if you're signed in to Git then when you fork, you can make a brand new copy of this and sort of save the last one the way it was. That's how I actually made 2 of each of these. Okay. Next, we're actually done with this lesson, so you can close that browser thingy. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my meetup page. Whoops. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do Vue with routing. Now, what's the difference between React, Vue, and Angular? They all do components, which is a W3C standard. They all allow you to do JavaScript using ES6 and TypeScript if you choose. They all have some way to handle styled CSS, and they have another way to handle HTML templates. But you're going to see that the way they're packaged is very different. Of the 3, which one is the oldest? Angular. But Angular 1 was 7 years ago. Angular 5 is the current version, and that one's really about a year and a half old. In between the new Angular and the old one, Facebook came out with React. And React is up to like version 16. It's gone through a lot of life cycle stuff. React is slightly faster in display because it uses something called a virtual DOM. But some programmers like the Angular framework better because it has more programming options, more sort of process to it. Vue is the newest one. Vue is actually created by a guy from China that used to work on the Angular team. And he left and started his own framework. And his idea was to take the best things he liked of Angular and sort of splice in the simplicity and speed of React. And Vue also uses a virtual DOM, which makes the rendering faster. And of the 3, you're going to find Vue is the sort of the smallest and simplest to use. So let's take that one, Vue with routing, right-click, and open that in a new tab. And wouldn't you know, it says, are you ready for some football? And it has 3 buttons, but this time the buttons change colors. Ooh, can I hear ooh? I want to know how to do that. All right, so let's go look at the file structure. So do most of you have that up and running now? Good. Or you're watching the screen in the front. Either way. All right, so we started index.html. Well, by convention, the Vue people make a div with an ID of app, just to be different from the guys from React who use an ID of root. And, this will work fine. Okay, let's look at index.js. So, just like, now I left some comments in there from the scaffolding that created this. So I do 3 things. I import Vue from Vue.js. I import my own custom app, and I import the router. So the router is going to be some code that I wrote. I'll show you that in a minute. Vue has a bunch of configuration things. This is optional, but we can tell it whether this is in production or not. That might affect your testing or your, the data sources, things like that. Okay, then the way you bootstrap Vue is you say, make a new instance of Vue. Now, what's fascinating about Vue, and this is one of its best virtues, you can actually make multiple instances of Vue in one page. And the reason that's useful, see, that's really hard to do, almost impossible in Angular. If you're working in another environment, like say WordPress or SharePoint, and you want to insert the code in there, and SharePoint has this thing called web parts. If you try and put 4 Angular 5 web parts on a page, good luck. They'll clobber each other. With Vue, works real easy. It's designed to do that. So what he does is he has his thing, a little brevity here. He has an L. So the L is #app. What does that point to? Div ID equals app. Okay? Then he's injecting router. So in Vue, you actually inject it at the bootstrapping level, which is nice. It's a lot simple. Wait till you see how much work you have to get to in Angular to make this kind of stuff happen. Then it has a template and components. So basically, I want to use the component called app that I imported above, and I want it to be the replacement for the div ID equals app. Okay, so now that I know that I'm using app, my next step would be to look at, come on, work with me here. So go into components, and this is where you get pleasantly surprised. Well, my components are the things underneath. So by convention, we're just going to put the top level at the root. And it's a single file. So instead of having a bunch of files like a CSS, what Vue does that's fascinating is it has a template section for the HTML. It has a script section for your code, and it has a style section for your body. So all 3 are in one file, and we call that a Vue file. Makes it very portable, easy to copy around. Okay? For those of you that like separation of concerns, it is absolutely allowable to put the script or the HTML and the CSS in separate files. There's a way to do that. But a lot of people that use Vue keep them all in one place. And all the editors now support this concept of having code and HTML in the same. Yes. The more it stays the same, the more it changes. Or is it? How does that go? All right. So what am I doing here? So I'm using I happen to have the component called page header. And then I have one called page footer. Guess what I'm doing in page footer? Assigning :text means I'm assigning a value to an attribute called text. And when the colon is there, it will process that and find out anything in code with the word message. How did I set that down here? In the export statement, I create a data property. So inside, I have my components. So I have my page header and footer. That's sort of the way we do in imports, but here we're doing it in a block. And then we say data, I'm going to have a thing called message, and it's going to say Philly.net Labs. And just for consistency, if I say hands-on, and I press space, look at the lower right-hand corner, and you'll see that my message changes in my footer. Okay? Cool. So now we know that we can pass this thing called the message. How does it get received by the footer? Let's go look at the footer. Well, the footer is in the folder components by convention, and it does the following. It has the same rule as React. You must have a single element wrapping. So footer has in it, and I happen to call it text, whereas in React, I think I called it name. I forget that, something different. Okay, how does that get passed in? Well, in your component definition, you create something called props. And it says, I expect to receive something called text. And when I get that in, I'm immediately going to make that available as text so that I can use it in my HTML markup. Go down a little further. Aha! I can do something called a scoped style. Scoped means that the CSS only applies to this component. So if you look here, you can see that we have light salmon. Okay, if you want to pick another color, by all means, go down and we'll do light green here. Okay, so that's more eagle-like. But it's that simple to change just the CSS for one little rectangle on the screen. Okay, I'm contractually bound to the light salmon, so I will leave that in there. All right, so let's understand routing. If I go back to app.vue, you will see that there's a thing here called router view. And I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to import anything into this page. I just say, I want my router view in the middle of this page. And what's nice in Vue is you can have another component above or below the router view, and it lines up on the screen just fine. Watch when we get into Angular, that doesn't work. Okay? So how does it know that router view is an acceptable directive? Any ideas where that came from? I gave you a clue earlier on. It begins with an I. Injection. So when I do in the index.js, when I inject the router to the entire single page application, all of the routing stuff comes along for free. So this router must be important. If you go up a little bit, and you'll see that router is actually defined by /router. Well, what they do in the world of Vue is they have a folder called router. You could have a router.js, but by convention, you go and you make a folder called router and you give it an index.js, and that's where you define your route information. This is where you have to import the Vue-router framework components or pieces. Since they're brought in here and then router is injected into every other component, every component then knows how to work with routing. When we define our routing, just like we did in React, we have to work with components. So we're telling it which component to throw up on the screen. So we have a conference, a division, and then we do this trick here. We say, Vue, I need you to use the router. Now this router is uppercase. This is the one that actually comes from the framework. And that's the thing that goes in and says, okay, now I know how to work with URLs. I know how to do the back button. I know all that stuff. You define the routes in a routes array. And it has things like a mode. It's going to understand history. No. Do not install Windows 10 while we're here. Okay. So, a route in Vue is a path. It has a name, and it assigns the display to a component. There are other properties that you can use, but the main ones you want to look at are path and name. Look pretty straightforward? Okay, so now that we see how routing is set up, the last thing I want to do is look at the NFL component, because the NFL component is going to have some data injected to it. That's your, are you ready for some football? That what we call the slogan. So I'll show you how you might do that in, so I want you to go over to your components and select NFL Vue and take a look at how that's structured. So notice that we're going to have an H1 element with a slogan in it. Unlike React, where you use single braces, Vue uses double braces, or handlebars, some people call them. Pretty straightforward. If I go down to the bottom, you'll see that there's a little bit of styling here. So I have a cyan color. Let's look at the script. The script is going to create a data function. The data function is going to return an object. The object becomes the source of data for this component only. You can hard code things in there like I did, the slogan, but if you get fancier down the road, you're going to be doing an async call to a backend, bringing back a bunch of JSON data and then assigning it to the data at runtime. We don't have enough time tonight to get into that level of work. Okay, so now that I have slogan in my data section, all I need to do is refer to slogan. I don't have to say this dot or state or anything. I just say slogan, and it appears. Yes? If you, just come on, mouse. There are ways to update the data. So if you had a click event or something, you could go and change slogan to some other value. The better way to do that is to use the library called Vuex, which is a Flux architecture implementation, just like Redux. And when you use that, then all of your data, you're going to be using something called computed properties, and the computed properties are going to be watching the data, watching the Vuex store, and that store is shared across the entire single page application. So all components. So then what you do is you go change things in the store, and all the components that rely on it automatically update their display. Uh-oh. Now we broke it. Okay? And, you know, if you want to do something like this, now I'm not going to save this, but okay. So it's that straightforward. Okay, do your homework. Does everybody know what their homework is? Add Super Bowl. Okay, for those of you that are less certain, I will go through the steps. The first thing, just like we did with React, you're going to find out all these tools very similar in approach. The first thing we have to do is create a new file called superbowl.vue. Now, in this simple online interface, when I create a new Vue file, it's an empty slate. If you're using Visual Studio Code or another fancy editor, and you're using something called the CLI for Vue, then that has built-in scaffolding, and when you create a new Vue file, it'll automatically have all the sections stubbed out for you. But we all know how to cut and paste, and I know that conference is very simplistic, so I'm just going to take conference, I'm going to copy it and put it inside a Super Bowl. And see how much of that editing you can get done. So if you look at it, hardly anything changes here other than the top with the phrase that I want to appear. And I might want to change the color, and I don't remember what the color is supposed to be. So moccasin seems like a wonderful color to use today. Just pick a color. Okay? So what I like about Vue is that I don't have to worry about making CSS, HTML files. Everything is sort of nice and neat. And just to explain a point, for those of you that feel daring, I'm just going to prove something here. I'm going to actually blow away the script section. So all I have is a template and a style. And my question to you is, will that make the component fail? Stay tuned at 9. No, details at 9. Okay, so after we make the component, where do we have to add it? Do we have to add it to app.vue? Absolutely not, because app.vue, it doesn't care. It just throws up a page header and a page footer. It don't care. It doesn't have any imports or any definitions. Where did we define the index of what folder, sir? Router. So go to index.js and router and do your copy paste dance. So we're going to take division. And notice that the screen is not crashing. It's not totally upset about this. Okay, so Super Bowl is now a viable. And then go down below, and you have to edit your route array. So we're going to have a path of Super Bowl. And its name is going to be Super Bowl. Technically we're not using the name in what we're doing this week, and the component that I want you to display is Super Bowl. Okay, so just like React, we add the component, we go edit the, in this case, the routing index.js to define the route, and then finally we have to go to header, which is in my example called page header. And if you go to page header, you'll see that I don't have to import any of my stuff. It already exists. All I have to do is add an LI that points to it. And if you were following along, you should see that I can now click on NFL, Conference, Division, Super Bowl, and they all give me a different URL, and they all give me different colors. Yes?
I'm looking at this header, and you've got a non tag and a router tag. What I'm thinking is that I'm going to bootstrap this.
Not sure. When I was doing this today, I was thinking the same thing. And I will show you, you're on to something. I'll show you what I consider a bug. Click on Super Bowl. Click on Division. Now, click on the right side of NFL. It only works if you click on the text. And it's just, it's lazy, it's a demo, an intro demo. There's probably a good way to make it so the entire LI is clickable and assigned to router link. I just didn't look up the exact syntax. When we go into Angular, I'll show you exactly how that works. Because in Angular, I have that working. Any questions on Vue? For those of you that are playing along, is this the first? How many of this is the first time you used Vue? That's sort of what I figured. It seems sort of easy to use, doesn't it? I guarantee it is. So that's why I like it a lot right now. Yes? That's a stub. That's there because a lot of people most components have some code in it, just a place to put your code. But remember, and that's good you pointed that out, that when we made Super Bowl, I just blew away the script and the export default. It still works. So the idea is when Vue processes a .vue file, it looks and it says, oh, is there a script? If there is, execute the script. If there is no script, pretend it's just export default. And so you really don't need it. And because of that, you can really skinny up these files, make them as clean as you need to. It's very common that a lot of your components, all they do is display some HTML and some CSS. So this is a good way to package that. You just have the template section and the style section. Okay. So we had reasonable understanding of Vue. Okay, close that baby. Go back to Meetup. This is where you got to put your thinking cap on. We're now going to do Angular. So take Angular with routing, open that in a new tab. Angular is using a slightly different online service called StackBlitz. The code Sandbox only does React and Vue. It does not do Angular. These guys just recently released this. This one does React and Angular, but not Vue. The nice thing about this one is it is actually using the same underlying technology that VS Code uses. And if I didn't mention already, all of these online products all do an export, and they export a file structure that is compatible with VS Code and other popular editors. So the purpose of using this to prototype, you can put something together, show it to a client, show it to your boss, and if they like it, then you export it, open it up in Visual Studio Code, and really go to town. All right. Does everybody have their big boy pants on? We are now using TypeScript. Please don't get nervous. Start with index.html. Aha! They don't do a div with an ID. They do a component called my-app. Remember that. We'll be looking for where that's defined. The loading is going to display until my app is ready. So it's basically replaces a spinner or whatever you would have. Okay, what does main.ts do? Here's where it gets interesting. I'm not going to go into detail on all this, but polyfills allows you to support older browsers. There's a whole bunch of nonsense here that allows you to bootstrap, and in all honesty, you're welcome to go read about all this in the web. Let's go on with our lives. So what we want to do is we want to dig into app. So you do it the following way. App could be broken into multiple files. So there's an app CSS, there's an app HTML, there's an app TS. TS is TypeScript. Similar to what I just showed you in Vue, the TypeScript here exports a class, and in this case, we're going to have a local field called name. That makes sense? Okay? Then it's going to have a template URL and a style URL. This is how you tell Angular that you want all of your stuff in separate files. So if I go up to app component HTML, that is my template. And my template is going to call two components, page header, page footer, and then in page footer, it's going to take the value of name and inject it into the attribute name that it passes to the page footer, just like we did in the other things. Okay. Finally, there's some CSS. Okay. So that's basically the structure of a component. Now, this is where it gets hairy. Everybody ready? Click on @module TS. Uh-oh. This looks like serious work. Now, How many of you are contractors? You don't have to be ashamed. Okay, if you're a contractor, there's more work to do in Angular. Therefore, you make more money. Excellent. You're learning. So, anyways, there's a thing called a module, a browser module, a forms module. I have to import the router module. Everything's broken into little pieces. And then all of my stuff that I'm going to use all has to be defined here. Egads. I have a routing module. I got my main, my app, all that stuff. Then, not only do I have to import it, I have to tell Angular what thing it's doing. It's either doing a declaration, I'm declaring that this component exists, or I'm saying, not only does the component exist, I want it to be the first one that shows up, which is called the bootstrap. Finally, for something like routing, I want you to import this. This is how you inject technology from other modules into the application. This is very similar to what I showed you in Vue, where it just took the word routing, and a comma. Well, instead of routing and a comma, here in Angular, you have to put it like 4 different places. Okay, so let's go look at the footer component. Remember, I showed you the footer actually is passed in something called name. How does the footer know that there's something in called name? Go down to footer.component. Aha! In Angular, you can either put the template and the style in a separate file, or you can just throw it in there in ES6 extended strings. So an extended string means you use a backtick to define the string definition. Then you can put it on multiple lines. So it's very common in Angular to throw everything in one file like this. Template literal, I like that. It has like, sounds like a rock group or something. I saw them last week at the the template literals. Okay, anyways, notice that in Angular you have to define the word that's going to be used for your component in markup, page-footer. And then I can have a template that it doesn't have to have a single root element, but it's got a template, and I'm doing double handlebars and the thing name. Okay? Then down here, this is where it gets a little tricky. If you want to have a prop, something passed in, then at the top of the screen, you have to not only import component, but you have to import something called input. And then you have to define an input with an @ sign, tell it the data type, string, and the name that it's going to be assigned to. So this is how name gets into this component. And then it can be displayed, and in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see Philly.NET Labs. So I just did the exact same thing in all 3 products. I took and passed a value from markup using an attribute down to a component and displayed it. It's all just syntax differences. Okay, ready for routing? Please tell me you're ready. Woo-hoo. Okay, go to routing module TS. This is pretty similar. Here I'm going to import router module and routes. Routes is a data structure. Router module is the magic that makes all the routing work. Just like I did in the other ones, I'm going to have to import my components so I know my components exist. And then in Angular, what you do is you make a data structure called routes, which is an array of objects. Each has a path and a component name. Pretty descriptive. Okay? What's not so obvious is this part down here. So you have to import the router module, and then when you import it, you tell it to run something called for_root. And that's how it knows to take the route array and use it to drive all of the routing in the URLs. It's just the way it works. Okay? And notice that this is assigned to the word routing module. Now, since that exists, and since appmodule.ts has routing module in it, and since the routing module is imported, it is now available to every component in the application. Now I want you to go to NFL component TS. This is another example of passing data to your template. So I did this in the other two products. I passed in a slogan. In this case, I don't have to input the slogan. I just define the field down in the class slogan. And as long as that exists, it can now be displayed in any template. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, do your homework. To do your homework, you're going to add. Now, what's that? Exactly. You're going to do superbowl.component.ts. So under the app folder, you're going to click the first one, which is a new file. And we're going to make this called superbowl.component.ts, not JS, TypeScript. And my recommendation would be to copy conference to Super Bowl. Okay, and what has to change is the selector. And in the template, you're just going to have it show the word Super Bowl. And I'm going to do moccasin again. Now, again, because we're using this styled array right in the component, it doesn't have the IntelliSense, yes. And finally, down in the bottom, just to be consistent, we have to export the class Super Bowl. Okay? Once that's defined, nothing's crashing. Now, there's an extra step in this world. The extra step is you have to go to appmodule.ts. Appmodule.ts, you have to define all your components. And yes, there's a way to partition this into multiple modules where you can have a module define a bunch of components. It simplifies your stuff. Okay, and then there's an extra step on the bottom. Now that you have imported that, you have to add it to your declaration section. And if you're scared, it'll crash your screen constantly until you get all this done. Okay. So now I have created the component. I've made it available to the application. My next step is to go to the routing module, and I have to import it here as well. I told you, contractors, more money. And then I have to update my routes so that that is going to be a valid route. Okay. Notice in this interface, you don't have to save. It automatically saves as you go. The last step, and remember in Angular there's 4 steps instead of 3. The last step is to go to my header, and this is the easy part. And remember earlier you asked a question? In Angular, they actually have router link as a attribute on any element. So I can do it right at the LI level. I don't have to have something inside the LI. Okay. So now I should have all this stuff, and I should be able to route to conference, division, and Super Bowl with isolated CSS, different colors. Yes, sir.
Notice when I tried putting in super space bowl for it double stacked.
Yeah, we don't want to go into all that CSS3 stuff right now. It's trying its best, but since the screen, you're trying to do too much in one screen. If that was full screen, it would be less of an issue.
Not making space.
There's probably a way around that. Not germane to the concepts tonight. So, does everyone agree that we can make components in all 3 frameworks? Come on, I need some life. Does everyone agree that we can pass props? In other words, pass something on a element, pass it down to the child, and have it display?
Yep.
Does everyone see that you can create a data string inside a component and have it display? Does everyone see that routing is pretty straightforward and very similar across the 3? Does everyone find an Angular too much work to do? Yes. Does everyone see that Vue is the least amount of work to do? Does everyone know why I like Vue now? Okay. Even though I am a contractor, it's fun to be able to get stuff done fast, because depending on how you sell your contract work, if you just get more stuff done, you win. So, all right. That was fun. Close it. Forgot to, I didn't fork this. I don't really care. I don't really need to save this because I'm just showing you changes that you could have made. Okay. Now, we only have about 40 minutes left, so we're going to have to go through this a little quicker. You are welcome to type along, but I think most of you are just going to follow along and see what changes I made. And the difference here is we're going to get into this idea of actually taking some business data and displaying it. Now, I will be quite frank with you. I took some old data that I had that lists all the NFL teams, but the data, yes, you remember that from previous classes, yes. The data here is not from 2017. It would be easy to fix. I just ran out of time today. If anybody wants to go through that effort of putting in the wins and losses correctly, we can do it for the Eagles. I can show you how to do it. It would be fun. Okay, so let's go to React. We're going to do React with data. And you're going to find that the darn application looks almost identical. Aha. So, why is Bill showing me this? Well, Super Bowl ain't nothing to see. Division ain't nothing to see. NFL, same old stuff. Conference actually shows me. Now, it looks a lot better if you're on a bigger monitor. In fact, I could, what I should do here is go full screen. That will help you a little bit. And of course, this won't. I guess if I refresh, maybe it'll, no. Even then, it doesn't figure that out. That's ridiculous. I could, but then it makes it like a lot more less interesting for me to demo the code side by side with the changes. So Control F5 is our friend. All right. So there you have it. So how did I get this darn thing to work? And since we're going to be, we won't have enough time to show you all this, I'm going to show you how to make the data come up and go through a for loop and display, but it's a little tricky because I want to separate the NFC from the AFC. It was just something to do. Your homework when you leave here tonight is to go and look at what we did. You're going to have your own copy of this, your own URL, and see if you can change the code so that you can do it by division. How many divisions are there in the NFL? That is correct. There are 8 with like 4 teams each. Okay? But this one just did it by conference, and I'll show you how I did that. So the question is, where did I put the data? So if I go to index, it's not in there. If I go to index HTML, nothing there. Aha. For React, what I happened to do is I made an ES6 thing. I just called it, well, technically it's just a JavaScript thing. And I called it Team API. And you'll see all of the data is here all the way to the end. Okay. And if one really wanted to get fancy here, and you could find Philadelphia, and I don't even remember what order these are in. NFC, East, Redskins, Philadelphia. So you could do something here like, can you believe last year we only had 13 wins, or 7 wins? Oh, wait a second. We were 15 and 4. 15 and 3. We won 3 playoff games, so 16. That's how many games we won. Last year we only won 7. The press did not see that coming. Right. And you'll notice that as I change the data structure, changes on the screen right away. That's useful. Okay, all the way on the bottom of this, you will see I have a thing called all, and it returns this.team. So basically it returns all the data. Okay? Go to the components folder and look at conference.js. And what conference.js does is it imports this JavaScript object called Team API. Now, React is sort of more code-oriented than Vue. So they expect you to use like standard JavaScript ES6 approaches. So I'm just going to import this TM API thing. Then what I'm going to do is pretty straightforward. I'm going to create an H3 for each of the conferences. And then I'm going to put a block of code inside curly braces. And remember back in the old days of visual inner dev, where we used to inject code right into our ASP pages? That's exactly what React's doing. So you just put your code right in there inside some curly braces. And you take and you call a function from Team API returning all. All is going to return an array of teams. So then I'm going to apply a filter. The filter is going to say, if the conference starts with NFC, include it. Then I'm going to map that to whatever's inside the parentheses here, egads. Okay, that parentheses ends down on the bottom here. And I'm going to say for each team in Teams, I want you to create a key, which is going to be like a unique index. And then I want you to assign data elements like location, name, wins, losses, and strings. That's pretty easy. That's how you do a for loop in React. The only difference between the top and the bottom is this one does a starts with AFC. That's the difference. Now, I could have, made it so that there was like a loop of a string array, AFC and NFC, and actually done this twice. And that would have even simplified it or skinny down the code a little more and made it much harder to maintain long term. If you choose to do that, be my guest. All right, so the only other thing I changed in the project is the CSS. Now notice that in React, I'm just going to import the CSS file. And what I did there is I said, I don't want a list style, in other words, get rid of the dots. I want to use what's called flex. And for those of you that have listened to my talks in the past, I love CSS Flexbox. So all I'm doing is I'm saying, make all the columns 150 pixels, except for the third and the fourth. And I just chose two different sizes. It doesn't really matter what size you choose. So that is the magic sauce that makes the last two columns a little more narrow than the first two. Okay? If you want to really get fancy using these frameworks, what you would do is you would take, you would take the stuff that's inside here and make this into a template in another component. But we're not going to go to that level of detail here. Any questions on how you iterate through data in React? Okay. Now we're going to run shy on time, so rather than have you actually build out the division, I'm going to ask that you do that on your own at home. I'll give you a clue. Yeah, basically copy everything. And then you change the filter and you just make more sections. That's all you do. Probably, if I were going to do this cut and paste to make division, I'd have the whole thing done in about 4.2 minutes. Unless I'm getting paid by the hour. Then I have to write tests. I have to do documentation. And okay. I'll have it for you on Thursday next week. Okay, now, so how do you think this is done in Vue? Well, let's go find out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here, close this one. I really don't, well, I'll save it. I don't really care. And I'll go to the link. And I'm going to say View with Data. Open that in a new tab. Now, we look at index.js, no changes. Exactly the same. Same with index.html. Same with app.vue. It does the exact same stuff. The only change we needed to make was in the conference. So let's see how we did it. In the conference, remember I showed you that a component can have a data section. So all I did is I sort of hard-coded the teams into the data section. If you were going to call a backend service and you were going to connect to espn.com/API, get a list of all the teams, then probably you would do that. You would write, what I would do is I would use Vuex, and I would rely on Vuex and have it go out and do the HTTP call, and everything would be happy. Just for our stuff tonight, we're just going to make an array called teams, and we don't even care to data type it. It just has an array. There's no other fanciness to it. I put the exact same styles in the bottom of the component that I just showed you in React. The simplicity in Vue is in the top. So what I do here is I say v-4 for each team in Teams, assign a key, and check to see if the conference starts with NFC. If it does, include it in the listing. And this part here is identical to what we saw on React. Same is true for AFC. And if I click on conference, you'll see that it gives you the exact same data, the same layout. So since we're in here, this is where this takes some thought in these kinds of products. Suppose you wanted to do the homework and actually do the division component. The problem I see here is that the data is sort of baked into the conference component. We'd have to basically make a copy of the data, put it in the division. That's where using back-end tools like Vuex come into play, because then you would define the data once, and then each component would get a copy of the store. And the store would have a, like you would say, $store.teams, and that would be your data. It's actually pretty easy to do. All right. Let's do a very brief hands-on exercise, because I can see a lot of you are just looking. Okay? Here's what I want you to do. Go to conference.vue. And I want you to copy this top section here that says data return. That's all I want you to do. Just copy that section and then go to superbowl.vue and paste it in. For it to be valid, it has to return something. So what we're going to do, let's call it Super Bowl winner. Okay. And I'm missing something here. I'm missing one closing brace. My mistake. Come on. What did I do wrong this time? I wonder, I don't remember if this thing is actually required. Pretty bad typing. Well, it was working fine. It's just the online interface isn't as receptive as I would like. Okay, so when we go to Super Bowl, nothing's happening. But my point is that if you add this field called SB winner, then you can come up here and say Super Bowl, and I think that there should be a law made that people stop using Roman numerals for the rest of time. Do your kids really understand Roman numerals? I don't think I do anymore. I think that's the right one. Yeah, all I know is Lee was the star of the Super Bowl. Where is Lee? Come on, Lee. That's not how you spell your name, though, is it? It's close. Okay, so what could I do here? I could do something like H1. What's that? Good? I have no idea. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's sort of a real simple, but basically that's what I wanted to show you today. How do I start working with data in these various components? And this is an example of, basically hard coding a value. If you come to my all day class, we'll actually be getting the data from a back-end store and stuff. So, because we'll have more time. Okay, any questions on manipulating data? So the big difference between React, which uses standard JavaScript objects to supply data, and Vue actually has a data structure within each component that is specific to that component. So we have just enough time to show you the way that Angular does it, which is completely different. So for my last trick here, I'm going to do Angular with provider. Notice I didn't say with data. And let's see what this one does. Now this one you have to really pay attention. There's more to it. Okay, nothing changed in styles. Nothing changed in main. Nothing changed in index. However, there's a couple new files here, and we're going to start at the lowest level. So the first one I want you to do, this is TypeScript. So what's the first word in TypeScript? Type. So how do I define strongly typed data in JavaScript? You start with a definition of a type. So what I did is I took the data structure that we have been working with, and I created a class called team. So this defines what a team is. Okay, next one. We're going to create sample data, so we're mocking the team. So open that one up. Aha. So when I mock the teams, I'm going to import the class or the type definition and then use that to define the data. So I'm making a constant called teams of type team array. And in this case, I have 32 teams. Next step, go to Data Service TS. This is where it gets fancy. And this is akin to what React does with Redux and what Vue does with Vuex. So this is going to be a back-end data store. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an injectable. An injectable is something, and remember the Angular comes from a little bit of C# and .NET influence. So basically they're using TypeScript types, they're injecting so that you can do testing and mocking and things like that. So what you do is you create an injectable, and I'm going to import the type, or excuse me, the constant called teams, and I'm going to do the following. I'm going to create a method called getTeams, and all it's going to do is return teams. That's pretty straightforward. But since I want to get more towards a back-end approach, rather than have my component in the front end figure out who's in the AFC or who's in the NFC, let's do it in the data service. So in the world of Redux and Vuex, they would call these getters. A getter gets the data and returns it with some change to it. So all I'm doing is I'm saying, go get me the teams array and filter, and that looks very similar to what I just did in React, except now I'm doing it on the back end. So all I'm doing is saying return back just the AFC teams or just the NFC teams. Now, this is where you get paid the extra money in Angular. Go to app.module. Notice the data service is imported. But unlike routing module, it is not an import. Remember when I used routing module earlier? It goes in the import section. And unlike footer, it's not a declared component. It is a provider. So there's a new classification here in Angular called the provider. That's how, back in the old days, they used to call these factories or services. But in Angular 5, they call it a provider. Now, the purpose of this is that this can now be injected into any component in your application. And the data will come along for the ride. What component did we inject it into? Correct, conference component. Ooh, it got longer. So what did I do at the top? I imported the service and the type, because TypeScript needs to have its type definitions. Then I get down here. Obviously, I did my styles. But here's where it gets to, well, there's two things you got to look at. See at the top? I imported component and something called onInit. OnInit is part of the component lifecycle. So I want to bring in that piece of the core code. And then I'm going to implement onInit. So basically onInit that's an interface. And I need to define the method ng-onInit. And yeah, this is hard to remember. You just look up the documentation. So every time this component starts up, it's going to say, hey, I have to run my init. And it says, ooh, I need to set the local field NFC teams, which is of type team, to a call to the data service. And I'm going to get the NFC teams. And I do the same thing for the AFC teams. once I have those two, it's pretty darn straightforward. In fact, it's almost identical to Vue. The difference is I iterate with a star ng4 instead of a v.4. And I have to put that word let in there. Well, I don't know. I think that's Fortran or COBOL. I don't know. I don't know where that came from. So now, the sad part is, if you use this editor and this approach, even though I have strongly typed, if I hit the dot there, there's no IntelliSense, which is unfortunate. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Does this actually show the exact same thing? And yes, it does. Okay, so you basically got the same data, the same all three ways. Okay. Now, we have 13 minutes. So I will do one hands-on exercise. Some of you that are more capable are welcome to do this. Bill doesn't like the fact that this is getting big and unruly. What should Bill do? Make a conference .component.html and also make a conference.component, spelling counts, .css. Okay, go back to conference, take everything out of the template, can do a Control X, paste it in the HTML. Okay, now it looks a little more realistic. Now it's got the nice coloring. Go back to component.ts, take everything out of style, and paste it into conference component style. And you're saying, but that doesn't fix it. Okay, remember when we first started in Angular today, I showed you this example up here. So you need something called template URL and style URL instead of the words template and styles. So I'm just going to copy those into component for this one. And obviously I don't want to repeat the header twice. What I want is oops, ooh, that seems to have worked. And there's my styles. So the difference when in Angular, if you want to have a separate file, you say template URL instead of template, and if you want to have separate CSS, and you can mix and match. It's up to you. But that's a good lesson to do just to get your head around how do I break this apart and make it so that my HTML designer or CSS person doesn't have to go into the JavaScript code. Okay? And with all of this working, guess what? Still no IntelliSense. Well, yeah, if you did this in VS Code, yeah, you could do that kind of thing. So, but that's the limitation of the online approach. So, any questions on the three frameworks? Yes, sir.
You said you could have separate files with frameworks too.
Yes. Well, in React, I already showed you, you just import the CSS file. There's a trick in React where you can import the CSS file and assign it to an array called styles. And if you do that and the planets align and you have all the correct UI names in your class names, then it'll automatically assign them places. But in React, it's actually a lot more work. You have to update a attribute called class name to like styles dot something. It's a little extra work. The one that's by far the easiest to work with styles is Vue. So, any other questions?
Hey, Bill. Really interested to know we have a viewer from Rio de Janeiro.
Rio de Janeiro.
Is it warm there?
Hey, love the Olympics 2 years ago. So, excellent. So how many people do we have online? Okay, so we're up to 17. That was pretty good. We didn't have as many on site today, probably because of the questionable weather here. For those of you that are in Rio de Janeiro, there's this thing called snow. We had a little bit of snow and sleet today, and it iced over, and it got really slippery, and people fell and hurt their behinds. And that's what happens in the Northeast. But it's supposed to, the rain's supposed to have stopped by now, and it's supposed to have started melting. It's still raining. Oh, God. All right. Yes, now you'll fall in a puddle. Good. So, yeah, come on up. Hopefully you got something out of this tonight. You at least see that there isn't, other than a bunch of syntax changes, they all do the same basic stuff. And almost every feature you want to do in Angular can be done in React or Vue and vice versa. So of the three, the one that is used the most in the wild is React. There's probably Angular would be second, Vue is third because it's newer. In terms of speed, I would say React and Vue are about the same. They're faster than Angular is in terms of display. So React, they recently rewrote their display engine. There's a name for it. Do you remember? React, if you look it up, React 16 added something that they made their display engine even more efficient and faster. Fiber, that's it, okay. Guess what Angular's doing right now? They're rewriting their display engine. It's codenamed Ivy. Somehow, Ivy is going to grow around fiber. I don't know. I think it's some reference to the show Gotham, but that's just me. So anyways, thanks for coming, and Chris Gomez is going to announce something.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Bill. That was great. That was pretty amazing to go through the 3 frameworks all in one night. So a couple quick announcements. There's a Philly Azure group that also meets here in Malvern. Normally meets on Tuesdays. It's still a once a month thing. But in order to line up with schedules, we are having a special meeting Monday, February 12th. It's at 6 p.m. And I'll scroll down here real quick. You can see we have our own meetup. If you just did meetup.com, Philly Azure on Google, you will find us. And the first topic is Dave Voiles' Introduction to Data Science on Microsoft's platform. So it's a really comprehensive look at data science and machine learning and all the stuff that's available on Azure, Azure Notebooks, and the Cognitive Services Suite. We wanted Dave to come do this, and we lined up with his schedule. The second topic of the night is on Azure Data Catalog with Zach Fennell. So this group, it's just formed. We've got 3 or 4 meetings in, and every single meetup is streamed on Mixer. And let me just show you real quick what we're doing here on Mixer. So tonight, here we are. This is us, philly.net. If you ever can't make it to the meeting, mixer.com/philly.net. And we are live, and now you get that effect of the infinite Mixer reception.
Now, we should finish it off like this. Ready? E-A-G-L-E-S. Eagles!
And then I also wanted to let you know that our friend Jeff Fritz, who is a program manager on the ASP.NET team, streams live Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. our time on Mixer. His handle is C# Fritz. But he also, if you follow him on Twitter, he announces them all. And the streaming is taking off here in Philly. We're doing it Philly.net. We're doing it Philly Azure. Jeff Fritz is doing his. And I expect that that we're going to see more and more streamers here in Philly doing code. So join us online as well.
Rich has an announcement.
Just one last thing, just to kind of follow up from the what we talked about earlier in the session. So we took a poll of all of the people who made their profiles public on the YouTube channel, and we're going to do a quick drawing. So we have 60 names. We just went to a random number generator site. So we're going to lower limit 1, upper limit 60, and the number is 11. So if I go to the spreadsheet and I look at number 11.
Oh, she was in Stranger Things.
Yes. Victor Kazan. So you don't have to be here. I can.
Accepting for Victor tonight.
Yeah, I will message you on the YouTube channel because I have a way to directly message from there.
Unfortunately, Victor lives in Rio de Janeiro.
Victor does live. Yeah, if Victor's not able to go, then we'll do a redrawing next week.
All right.
In 2 weeks.
Thanks for coming. Keep an eye on your email. The tickets for Code Camp go on sale next Tuesday. Drive safely and enjoy the Olympics.